John Frazer, NRA-ILA's Director of Research and Information. John, good evening, sir.
Hey, Cam, how are you?
I'm good. Thanks for coming on the program tonight.
Sure. Hope everyone can understand me. I'm fighting a little cold.
You sound okay,
Okay,
but
great.
I'll be able to translate if we have any problems. So I get my newspaper yesterday, and normally I don't actually read my newspaper because I get the Washington Post. My wife likes the comics and the horoscope, but it was really hard to avoid. Front page of the Washington Post, big series, The Hidden Life of Guns, and this continued today, and I guess probably will continue for several more days. Yesterday's piece, John, was talking about gun stores in Maryland and how there are a few gun stores who have more traces for firearms that they originally sold than others, and that must mean that they're doing something wrong, even though local law enforcement said they work with us, we have a good relationship with them. Today's piece was a complete rewrite of history when it comes to the TIART Amendment. I mean, what's your take, generally speaking, on what we've seen over the past couple of days from the Washington Post?
Well, this has been in the works. This obviously has been in the works for a long time. Several reporters working on it, many stories just over the weekend. And what it is it's a story that's been around for about 10 years or so. Ever since to take a step back a second, what I think has happened is that sometime in the 90s, people realized that one thing that BATF, as it was then, was pretty good at is actually tracing guns. You know, if a gun is recovered, they can go through the chain of distribution and figure out who bought it.
Yeah.
Pretty often. But that was a useful law enforcement tool, and as so often, the means becomes the end. When your only tool is a hammer, everything starts to look like a nail. So a lot of academics started using this, and politicians and so on, and they started saying, and you started seeing these reports of, X percent of guns come from whatever percent of dealers, and the numbers vary depending on what year and who's studying it and what point they're trying to make.
Mm-hmm.
And this Post article is more of the same. Now they did a lot of research, and they were a little more careful than usual. So for example, they tried to account for sales volume. I mean, if you have a statement that says 1% of dealers sold 50% of traced guns, you don't know if it's entirely possible that 1% of dealers might have sold 50% of all the guns.
Right.
There are a few people in the gun world know that there are usually in every state or every area there are a few really big gun stores that do a lot of volume, and so that's a little bit of what you're seeing here. But apparently, what we also need to start pointing out because I mean it might have been too obvious is that because most guns that are traced to somewhere pretty close by. Stores that sell in areas with higher crime are probably going to have more traces. That's
a really good point, John, and maybe we do need to start pointing that out because gun control advocates, they talk about the iron pipeline, and a gun that is bought in Virginia on Monday ends up in Presque Isle, Maine on Wednesday morning. Right. So maybe we do need to point out that that's not actually what happens.
Yes, 70% of guns that are traced were originally sold at retail in the same state where they are traced, and we've talked about that a couple weeks ago with respect to the most recent Bloomberg study.
Yeah,
and so the idea that guns are all sold in these hundreds of miles long trafficking pipelines from state to state and so on has never really held up, and now we actually have strong evidence to the contrary in this Washington Post series.
Yeah. Now, what do you make of their rather one-sided and incomplete version of history when it comes to the TIART Amendment that they reported on today? I mean, you had a quote from I think it was one of the guys from the Chuck Wexler saying that the TIART was an embarrassment, or it was horrible for law enforcement.
Thing you can think of.
Yeah. Yes, the most offensive thing you could think of. when law enforcement actually still had access to all of the ATF trace data that they had in the past.
Yeah, absolutely. Law enforcement was never cut off. And in fact, NRA has always been willing to accommodate every reasonable concern from law enforcement agencies about being able to get information from ATF for legitimate law enforcement purposes, including statistical studies that would help them trace. What we were concerned about was release of confidential information that would potentially allow informants or police officers or suspects to be identified, and we were very clear about that all along as well. And that concern is exactly why ATF didn't want to release the information when the city of Chicago was suing them for it now going back 7-8 years ago. And their ATF's position was always clear, not to disclose certain information. That's the position that they were defending in court. NRA's concern, in part, was that the case might go the wrong way, and that congressional action would be a good idea. And as a result, Congress eventually did take action and blocked the wholesale release. Is exactly what ATF was trying to argue in court.
Well, absolutely. And, at the time, I remember Ray Kelly, New York City Police Commissioner, wrote a letter to Attorney General John Ashcroft saying, you got to do something. This is, valuable law enforcement information that does not need to be released to the public. It's got names of undercover officers. This could be damaging to investigations, because this was a matter of making this public record. It wasn't just that Mayor Daley wanted this. The head of the Vice Lords in Chicago could have requested this ATF trace data under a Freedom of Information Act request, and he would have been able to receive it.
Yeah, and one of the things that gets thrown at it is, has there ever been any harm resulting from release of the data? Well, the answer is, has it damaged any cases? Or, there was a New York Daily News article several years ago that said that 4 cases have been compromised and potentially 14 more. Can you name those cases? Well, no. Law enforcement anonymous sources don't tell us what cases, and if we did, we wouldn't say.
Yeah. Yeah, so, what do you think about the timing of this, John? Here we are. We're a week before Election Day. We've seen gun control come up. We had a listener tell us that, ads are running in Illinois by anti-gun candidates. I just saw that there's a new ad in Pennsylvania run by a gun control guy running for Congress. We've seen this in Pennsylvania's state Senate race as well. Is gun control soaring or surging back as an issue here right before Election Day?
I think some are trying to make it an issue. We saw a column or release today from Paul Helmke saying that candidates should appeal to swing voters by pushing for gun restrictions. He actually used the gun control word for the first time in years that we've seen, I think.
Really?
Yeah, they don't usually like to call it that. They changed the name of their organization to get away from that, but there it is. I think some people do think they can get some political mileage out of it now. Certainly, one of those people is Mayor Bloomberg.
Mm-hmm.
The trace issue is his big issue, of course. So I wouldn't be at all surprised if he's been heavily pushing this whole concept to the press.
Very interesting, John. Hey, listen, I appreciate you coming on the program tonight, and if we need to double back with you later in the week, depending on what the Washington Post writes, can we get you back on?
Sure, absolutely. There's no question. They are definitely buying their ink by the barrel on this one.
Absolutely. John, thanks so much. Have a good evening, sir.
Thanks, Ken.